Legend has it that after Rome destroyed Carthage, it did one more thing. Burning the city wasn't enough. Rome supposedly plowed the earth with salt, so nothing would ever grow there again. Not a stalk of wheat, not an olive tree, not a city. Rome wanted Carthage's name erased from the map itself. It's one of history's most famous acts of revenge. It's in textbooks, it's in movies. In some languages, salting the earth is still an idiom today, meaning to destroy your enemy so completely that nothing is left behind. There's just one problem. Not a single ancient source describes this happening. Not Polybius, not Appian. None of the historians who actually witnessed the destruction ever mention salt. Not one word. That scene was invented 2,000 years later, in the 19th century, a dramatic flourish added by Romantic-era historians. So what actually happened? Rome didn't plant salt in that soil. Rome planted wheat. And within a few generations, an enormous share of the bread feeding the city of Rome came from the land of the enemy it had just destroyed. Rome didn't destroy Carthage. Rome ate Carthage. But to understand what that sentence actually means, we first need to understand exactly what Rome was eating. Most of us assume Carthage was Rome's rival empire, two giants playing the same game. That's not quite right, because their power came from completely different places. Here's the contrast in one sentence. Carthage built its power mainly through ports, tribute, trade agreements, and dependent allies. Rome built its power mainly through conquered land, colonies, and permanent political control. Carthage was, above all, a trading empire. Yes, it held territory in North Africa and Spain. It collected tribute. It fielded real armies. But its deepest advantage was never a single army. It was the maritime network that paid for those armies, moved its silver, and tied its possessions together. And here's a detail that shows how large that network was. In the 3rd century before Christ, Carthage controlled more territory than the Roman Republic did. Its capital was a city of roughly 250,000 people, the wealthiest metropolis in the Mediterranean. Rome worked differently. It took land, built roads over it, planted colonies, moved its own people in, and bound conquered regions permanently into its political system. For Rome, land was property. For Carthage, land was mostly a station along a route, two different centers of gravity, and one Mediterranean Sea. So what happens when those two logics collide? Sicily, an island sitting dead center in the Mediterranean. For Carthage, the keystone of its entire trade network. For Rome, a threat sitting right off Italy's doorstep. And this is where the two logics collided for the first time. 264 before Christ. The First Punic War. An ordinary History Channel would race straight to Hannibal, the elephants, and the Alps. But hold on, that comes later, in the Second War. Before we get there, we need to understand what these wars were actually destroying. Because we're not going to follow the battlefield. We're going to follow the balance sheet. This wasn't a war of honor. It was a market war. And in a market war, you don't aim for the enemy's soldiers. You aim for the enemy's revenue, which left Rome with a problem. Because Carthage's revenue lived on the sea, and Rome had no way to reach it. No fleet, no naval tradition, nothing. Think about what that actually means. The most powerful land army in the region stood on the shore, staring at an enemy it physically could not touch. Every Carthaginian ship that sailed past was money moving through a door Rome couldn't open. So Rome did something no rational power should have been able to do. It built a navy from nothing and threw it at the sea. The early years were brutal. Rome lost ships, lost fleets, lost thousands of men to storms without a single enemy in sight. And it built them again because Rome had understood the one thing that mattered. It could never reach Carthage's wealth by land. That wealth flowed through sea lanes, and until those lanes were cut, Carthage could lose battle after battle and still not fall. So Rome stopped trying to kill Carthage and started dismantling its network instead, because the way you kill a network is simple. You cut its knots one at a time. Sicily, gone. Sardinia, gone. The silver mines in Spain, gone. After each war, Carthage lost another knot, and every knot was a revenue line. By the time the Third Punic War began, Carthage was no longer an imperial rival. Its overseas network had been dismantled. Its military freedom was restricted. Its strategic independence was broken. But here's the part that actually enraged Rome. The city itself had recovered. Stripped of its empire, Carthage had gone back to what it did best: trade, and grown wealthy all over again. Wealthy enough that powerful voices in Rome couldn't stand the sight of it. So in 149 before Christ, Rome came for the third and final time, not to defeat an empire. That empire was already gone. It came to destroy the rich city that remained. 146 before Christ, after a 3-year siege, Carthage fell. Rome burned the city, leveled it, enslaved the survivors, and the history books stop right there. Carthage was destroyed, they say, full stop. But the story doesn't end there. The real story is just getting started. For decades, no great city rose again on the site. Then Rome looked at that land with fresh eyes, because what was still there hadn't changed. The harbor was still there. The fertile plains were still there. That perfect position at the center of the Mediterranean, still there. Geography outlives hatred. Julius Caesar was the first to propose rebuilding Carthage as a Roman colony. After his death, Augustus completed the project. Around 29 before Christ, a new city rose on the exact same spot. Its name, Colonia Julia Carthago. Rome rebuilt the city of the enemy it had leveled to the ground, but this time not as a rival, this time as its own economic engine. Now let's look at Rome, the capital of the empire. Hundreds of thousands of people lived there, and feeding them was Rome's biggest political problem. A hungry crowd is a dangerous crowd, so Rome built a system called the Annona, a vast state-managed operation that secured, shipped, and distributed grain to the capital. Hundreds of thousands depended on it, directly or indirectly, and eligible citizens received regular grain handouts. For centuries, keeping that system running was one of the most important jobs the Roman state had. So where did that grain come from? By late antiquity, North Africa had become Rome's single most important grain supplier. The fertile provinces centered economically on the rebuilt Carthage. Some estimates put its share at well over half of the grain reaching the capital. In other words, much of Rome's bread now grew on the enemy's old land. Picture it. A Roman citizen wakes up, picks up the bread the state hands out, eats it, and the flour in that bread grew on the very soil of the enemy Rome had spent 2 centuries trying to destroy. Rome was feeding itself off its enemy's field. And do you know how large that rebuilt city eventually grew? Estimates vary widely, but Roman Carthage may have housed several 100,000 people, becoming one of the largest cities in the Western Empire, second only to Rome itself in many reconstructions. Rome had transformed its former enemy into the economic second city of the Latin West. And it doesn't stop there, because Rome didn't just take the land. There was a Carthaginian writer named Mago. He'd written a massive treatise on agriculture, irrigation, crop rotation, soil management, a summary of everything Carthage knew about farming. After the city fell, Rome gave away most of Carthage's surviving books to allied kings, but one work was considered too valuable to give away. The Roman Senate itself ordered Mago's agricultural treatise translated into Latin. Think about that. They destroyed the city, enslaved its people, but the state's highest body issued a special order to keep the farming manual, because that book taught them exactly how to make that land productive. This is what eating Carthage actually means. Rome didn't just kill its enemy, it digested it, took its land, took its harbor, took its agricultural knowledge, took its trade geography, and absorbed all of it into its own body. And here's where the story turns. Rome didn't become dependent on Africa the moment it destroyed Carthage. That's not how it happened. The dependency was built slowly, one logical step at a time. Rome conquered the land, then it integrated that land into its system. The African provinces turned out to be extraordinarily productive, so more and more of Rome's grain came from there. And the more it came from there, the more Rome concentrated its entire food supply on a single region. Conquest became integration. Integration became productivity. Productivity became concentration, and concentration quietly became dependency. Now look at Rome at its peak. more than half its bread coming from Africa. Carthage rebuilt, now the empire's second city, the system. Perfect. Rome won, right? Now look at that same picture from a different angle. One region, one maritime system, one increasingly indispensable supply zone. That's not power, that's a single point of failure. And Rome never noticed, because when you're inside a system that's working, you can't see how fragile it actually is. And then, one day, someone came for it. October 19th, 439, Anno Domini, a Vandal king named Genseric took Carthage with almost no resistance at all. And on that day, Rome lost control of its most important grain zone. The city wasn't burned, the temples weren't destroyed, Rome was still standing, its walls still intact, but the artery was now in someone else's hands. So what did Rome do? 442, Anno Domini. Emperor Valentinian III signed a treaty with the Vandals. Rome formally recognized Vandal control over the richest parts of Africa. The deal preserved some access, and grain shipments seem to have resumed, but now on terms Rome no longer controlled. Do you understand what just happened? 300 years after leveling that city to the ground, Rome sat across the table from the people who now held its bread and signed away control of it just to keep eating. That's what this video is really about. Rome ate Carthage, and that bite fed it for centuries. But when the thing you eat is also feeding you, you become dependent on it. And the day someone else controls that bite, the hunger becomes theirs to hand out. Rome destroyed a rival and freed itself from a competitor, but by absorbing it, integrating it, and leaning on it more and more, it slowly built a dependency it never chose on purpose. And that dependency, in the end, became one of the pressures that helped bring the Western Roman Empire down. You can eat your enemy, but what you eat becomes part of you. And when someone takes that part away, you're the one left bleeding. So today, we found out that history's most famous act of revenge was actually a slow-motion handover in disguise. Rome didn't destroy Carthage. Rome became dependent on it. Drop a comment. Can you think of another power or another company that ate a rival only to end up quietly dependent on the very thing it swallowed?